They built a whole system on you not knowing your worth. Today, that changes. Stop asking, start doing. Take the leap, make the move, build the life. I'm Gabrielle Elisabeth, and this is the Audacity. So today we're going to talk a little bit about starting over, which I believe is one of the most audacious things that a person can do. It is terrifying. It is unsettling. It is every word that you can think of that does not feel good in your spirit to do. But it's also a beautiful thing. It's a new beginning. It's a new start. It's a fresh start. And it's one of the most audacious things that anybody can ever do, because a lot of times you don't know what the way forward even looks like, which is why it's so terrifying. But instead of looking at it as fear, I challenge you to look at it as an opportunity. And in order to get you to do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life. Dun, dun, dun. So I grew up in Chicago, Illinois, in or around. And I grew up with two parents that love me and my siblings very, very much. But at the time that I was conceived, they weren't loving each other very much. And watching my parents in this loveless marriage really taught me about love, for better or for worse. Now, I'm not trying to slight my parents and say that they were these terrible people and did such a bad job. That is not my goal at all. I'm just talking about my experience as the child that was watching the two of them not get along. And what was so interesting about their relationship is that they didn't fight, they didn't yell, they just didn't interact. Which was almost worse. I remember watching television when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I would see the parents on the TV like kissing and holding hands. And I remember going to my mother and asking her, "Mommy, why don't you and Dad kiss?" And, she just kind of changed the subject, and that stuck with me. And I was like, "Oh, that's so interesting." So, like, watching couples or parents show public displays of affection was something that was very foreign to me, and I didn't realize how much that stuck with me as I got older. And I ended up in a marriage, my first marriage, that was, I wouldn't say loveless, but public displays of affection were not a thing. He would tell me that he didn't want to hold hands. He would tell me that he just wasn't like that. Like, it was a very interesting relationship, to say the least. And I didn't realize that I literally married what was modeled for me. I married exactly what I had seen for many, many years that created this being that you see today. And it didn't strike me until I was severely depressed and anxious, riddled with anxiety, truth be told, and my body was physically reacting to the environment that I was in, and I didn't know how to leave at the time. And to add to the pain that I was feeling watching my parents not publicly love one another, I also grew up with a person in my family that was addicted to a substance. And what addiction does to a family, it literally sucks the oxygen out. And it's one of the hardest things that I've had to come to terms with as I've gotten older, like just how much trauma is trapped in my body because of those experiences. And it's really hard because you hate the addiction, but you love the person. So it's hard to combat or deal with those two things. They really hit heads a lot, even to this day. It's something that I struggle with because of the experiences that I had to deal with so very young, that I'm still unpacking to this day. But that's the thing about trauma, and especially childhood trauma. You can dress it up, but it always follows you. You have to deal with it. You 100% have to deal with it, because it's not just going to disappear. And came really, really, really good at performing stability. I never wanted to be the child that was causing issues for my parents. I wanted to be the good girl. I wanted to get everything right. I had this pressure on myself to be good. And the reality is, I'm a human being and I was going to make mistakes. And so when I felt like I was falling short, and I still struggle with this, it caused me like severe anxiety, and I didn't know how to move through that. Now, with life, we do get better at these things. I've been in therapy. I believe in God, so that also centers me and helps me. I have great friends and a great, wonderful partner in my life right now. But, you know, childhood trauma sucks. It really sucks. Now let's talk a little bit about the relationships in my life. So there also is someone in my life. The more I say these things out loud, I realize just how much crazy stuff has happened to me. But we persevere. There was someone in my life that took out a lot of money in credit cards in my name. And it happened to me at a very young age. And at the time, I didn't realize how much that violated me and how much it took away my freedom for my future. Because I was convinced that this person was going to pay it back and pay the bills on time and everything was going to be okay. But that's not what happened. The cards went into default. It completely ruined my credit. I went into my first marriage not telling him about my low credit score. And after we got married, I did disclose this to him, and he was not kind about it. He actually was really mean and told me that he wasn't going to help me with it at all, which, whatever. What would have been nice. What I wanted to happen was I thought he was going to help me pay it off and maybe I would pay him back or etc. and so forth. But no, there wasn't really any support there. And then he said something to me that I'll never forget. He basically called me a stereotype and said, ha 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 ha, that it's funny because you're black. And you know what they say, black people have bad credit. And that told me everything that I needed to know at that moment. I didn't realize it, but it did. It absolutely did. And I should have listened to myself at that time that, we just weren't a good match for one another. But it's microaggressions like that I dealt with a lot within the relationship, and I would just brush it off, brush it off, brush it off. But those things start to compile. I promise you, keep listening. I know it feels like I'm trauma dumping right now. That's not what I'm trying to do, but I'm just setting the stage for what it took for me or where I came from so that I could start over and just how deep into the gutter I actually went. So after all of that with my ex, the marriage ended. It ended quietly. There wasn't a big storm. And after I was out of that situation, I realized just how depressed, anxious, and physically sick I was. And I don't say that as a slight against him because honestly, I forgive him. I forgive him. I forgive the person that put me in that debt. Now that person made amends and got me out of that debt and helped my credit get restored. But that pain was still sitting within me. So I forgave them for my peace. And I'm not going to harbor on this too long because I don't want to keep giving CPR to a dead experience. But again, I do think that it's important to know where I came from, the rock bottom that I hit. And I joke all the time with my best friend because back when we were in a show together, I said to her, I don't know what rock bottom looks like. And then I hit it, and it was dark and it was terrible. And now that I know what that feels like, I will never, ever go back there again. So I'm very precious with me. Very, very precious with my time, with my energy, with where I decide to put my physical being, because people will play in your face. If you let them, they will continuously play in your face. So you should be stingy with yourself as well. Have audacity to say no. Say no to anything that's not serving you. And the depression that I was dealing with or anxiety that I was dealing with, it didn't look the way that you see it on television or how it oftentimes presents itself in the people that we love and are close to us. For me, it was brain fog. It was my skin was physically breaking out. I couldn't stay committed to anything. I would start something and then immediately would just move on to the next thing. I thought I had like attention deficit disorder, or I really thought something was wrong with me. But I also was dealing with someone that was in a deeper depression than I was. So I was a caretaker and wasn't focused on what was actually or listening to what was actually going on within me. But the moment I made the choice to leave, the moment I made the choice to leave, it was one of the hardest choices that I've ever made in my entire life. And not because I wanted so badly to be in the marriage. I wanted the idea of the marriage that I had. I wanted the marriage that I had dreamed about and planned and thought I was going to have. So I had to mourn the reality of what I was actually living, and that was the hardest part about the like I can't even I can't even speak fully about it without getting tongue tied because it was an emotional experience. It really, really, really hurt. And again, it's not because I miss that person or want to be with that person. It was just a realization that my life wasn't looking the way that I had planned it to. And as we learned about me in the past, I already came from such an unstable foundation um, of love, or like how I defined love. Like, if I didn't think I served a purpose, I didn't think that I had any value. And so for my marriage to dissolve in that way, I felt like nothing. I felt like I had failed. And failure wasn't an option to me in my mind at that time. So it was really, really a tough time. And what came after that was silence, grief. But on the other side of that was clarity. Oh, and the only way out of that is through. You can't go around it. If you try to do that, if you try to go all these different ways to not feel the pain of the situation that you're experiencing, it's just going to follow you. It's just going to be in your closet waiting for the right moment that it wants to come out, and you'll have no control. Because I tried that. I tried, and I would just spontaneously combust and be sobbing randomly in bathrooms or walking down the street with my sunglasses on. It was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. And the more I talk about this, the more I don't want to air this episode. But I do know that people will be able to relate to this because so many of us suffer in silence, and we don't lean on our community because we start feeling unsafe. We lose ourselves, and we don't know how to even ask for the help that we need. So I hope that this makes somebody feel seen, um, because no weapon formed against you shall prosper. It shall not. We are meant to be lights in this world. We're supposed to live in our truth and be filled with joy. That doesn't mean that hard things won't come, but we don't stay there. It's just a storm. It's just a storm, and there's always a rainbow on the other side of it. So after that marriage dissolved, I reconnected with my high school friend. We never dated, but I always really liked him. And we didn't talk for about 10 years while he was married and I was married to someone else. And then we found ourselves in New York City at the same time and reconnected and just fell madly in love with one another. And it was complicated because um, his ex-wife didn't make things easy for him. I'll just put it that way. I don't want to go too deep inside of that, but she didn't make it easy for him. And he also has a lovely son who I also love very dearly. And now we have this beautiful blended family. Um, but Step parents' love is sometimes an invisible love. It's not valued oftentimes by the biological parents, not necessarily the one that you marry, but the other one. And a lot of times people can do things that are disguised as for the child, but actually are just blocks to keep you separated from that child. And that's something that I have been dealing with this particular person. And it's not fun. It's not fun because all I want to do is love this child, and all the child wants to do is love me. And we have found a beautiful relationship, with even with the difficulty that's been going on. But I just really hope that that person finds love and finds peace, because we should pray for those who despitefully use us and are desperately wicked. You know what I mean? So we're going to leave that there, but just know that if you are dealing with someone who is trying to be an enemy when all you're trying to give is love, that's not your business. That's their problem, and they have to wake up with themselves every single day, and that is punishment enough. But to circle back and like bring this all together, the point of all of this is, if I didn't leave the life that was causing me to feel suffocated, like it literally felt like someone was pushing on my chest. I was riddled with anxiety, riddled with depression, and I was hopeless. I was hopeless, truly. And nobody knew. Nobody knew. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell my friends. I was just severely depressed and was trying my best just to stay above water. If I wouldn't have left that and completely started over, I wouldn't be marrying the love of my life. I wouldn't be I wouldn't be living in New York again. I wouldn't be going back to Broadway in an original show. I wouldn't have the friendships that I have. I wouldn't have the stepson that I love so dearly. I wouldn't have this beautiful dog. I wouldn't have this podcast, because I wouldn't have done the audacious thing that led me to creating a podcast about having audacity and doing the things that scare us so that we can have more in life. It took a long time for me to accept this, but starting over is not a setback. For so long, my body felt like that was just not the truth. Sometimes you tell your mind something, but you have to wait for your body to catch up with it. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. It talks a little bit about how your body will store trauma and experiences, even things we don't remember from childhood. But I digress. Um, but I realized that it wasn't a setback, it was a launch pad. It was a launch pad into my new life, and also was a statement not only to myself, but to everyone around me, that I knew that I deserved more. And that is so powerful. That is so powerful because it starts with us. It starts with you. You have to make that decision first, and you have to teach people how to treat you and let them know what you're allowing and what you're not. So do the work. And the last thing that I want to leave you with, my offering for this episode, is that I want you to write down an old story. Write down Write down something that is no longer serving you, something that is no longer true, something that was never true to begin with, something that was never yours, whether that's like for me, debt that I didn't actually accrue that someone else did, but I'm still directly affected by it. Write that down, and write down next to it, I release this. Release it, let it go, move on, burn it, bury it, rip it up, whatever it is that you need to do, and start living free. Start living in that new life that you have set for yourself. Make that first step forward. All right, guys, I will see you next Wednesday. And remember, permission is not required. Bye.